In this video, I'm going to share with you some of the sights we saw and some of the wildlife we observed on our recent trip from California to Mount Rushmore. Our first stop on the trip was to Boise, Idaho to visit a friend. One of the places we visited for a short time was the Deer Flat National Wildlife Refuge. We were only there for about an hour, but we did see some wildlife. We saw a couple of rabbits and some other small rodents and water birds like ducks and geese. They also have an osprey nesting close to the visitor center. After a few days in the Boise area, we drove through Yellowstone on the way to Montana to meet up with some family members. When you visit Yellowstone, you're virtually guaranteed to see elk and bison. They're everywhere. You'll even see elk hanging out on the lawn in front of the gift shop. Of course, elk and bison were not the only animals we saw when passing through Yellowstone. We also saw a coyote who had just caught a vole for a late afternoon snack, a black bear relaxing in the shade, and of course more elk and bison along the way. A little later we saw another black bear, and this one had two cubs with her. We spent the next day driving through Yellowstone again. We saw some more wildlife and visited Old Faithful. And of course, whenever you pass through Yellowstone, you can expect to see some beautiful scenery. When we left Yellowstone, we were on our way to South Dakota to see Mount Rushmore, Crazy Horse, and a few other sites. On the way, we stopped for a little while at the Battle of Little Bighorn Memorial. We spent some time in the museum, walked around the site, and listened to a ranger give a rather lengthy talk about what really happened there. But we had to get back on the road because we had a long way to go and a short time to get there. After many hours of driving, we finally made it to Hill City, South Dakota, which is where we would be staying for the next few days. That night there was a pretty strong hailstorm with hailstones about the size of a ping pong ball. The next day we finally made it to Mount Rushmore. I'd seen it so many times in pictures that being there almost didn't seem real. Even though I was looking at this incredible work of art in person, it still felt like I was looking at a postcard. The next day we went to a zip-line adventure park type of place and spent the whole day there. You can take a chairlift to the top of the mountain where you can grab a bite to eat at a snack bar that has a view of Mount Rushmore. The next place we visited was Jewel Cave National Monument, where we took a cave tour that lasted about an hour and 20 minutes. It's a pretty awesome place with some pretty incredible rock formations. After Jewel Cave, we went over to Custer State Park, which was nice enough to warrant a second visit the next day. That day started with a visit to the Crazy Horse Memorial. There's a large museum with a lot of Native American artwork and artifacts. The memorial itself is only partially finished, and this is what it will look like once it's finally completed. After Crazy Horse, we went back to Custer State Park again and saw a lot of wildlife. We saw a white-tailed doe and her fawn. There's a herd of 1,300 bison here, and there were quite a few young ones in the bunch. There are also numerous large fields with more prairie dogs than you can shake a stick at. And we also got to follow around and observe a small family of pronghorn. After driving around the Wildlife Loop Road in the park, we started out on the Needles Highway. This drive will take about an hour. You'll get to see an incredible landscape, and on this drive you'll pass through 3 very narrow tunnels, one of which is only 8.4 feet wide and 12 feet high. Right before we went through one of these narrow tunnels, we were fortunate enough to see a mountain goat. The only time I've seen these animals in the wild before was in Alaska. They were at least 10 miles away and looked like little white specks on the side of a mountain. This time, we were close enough that I could have leaned out the window and touched it. The last place we visited inside Custer State Park was Sylvan Lake. It's a man-made lake that was created when a dam was built back in 1881, and it is incredibly beautiful. The next morning, we packed up our stuff and headed home. We drove from South Dakota to Salt Lake City, where we spent one night before finally making it home the next day.